of mankind. The minute you get the ACC or the GRE, it determines whether you can come and join us or you can't. We keep score. We figure out what is the average GMAT and GRE for the students who go to Stanford and Yale and all of these other lesser-known schools. And we have to keep score, because if we have bigger scores, we're better than them. And in order to succeed, we have to be better than others. But that's not what bigness is about in any way. We need to help everybody keep learning for the rest of their lives, so that we all can become the people that God wants us to become. And of all of the universities that I know of who have succumbed to the view of the smallness of mankind, there is one big exception, and that is Western governors. Everything I feel with you is based upon the bigness of mankind. Everything that I feel is that it's dynamic, it's not static. People can learn for the rest of their lives. Many of you, like I, can choose to take a different career in halfway through and bring happiness to our families. And so I give my honest congratulations and gratitude to so many of the people here who have sacrificed so much to create this marvelous university. Now, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to close by telling you how I learned about the bigness of mankind. One day, a number of years ago, I was driving to school, and about 6 a.m., all of a sudden, I had a feeling in my mind and in my heart that something important is going to happen to me, Clay Christensen. And there was no specificity about what that was. But it was a very clear feeling that I was going to be given a responsibility in the not too distant future. And so as I continued to drive to work, I wondered, what might that be? And then a couple of weeks later, there was an announcement that somebody in my field was going to leave their employment. And I put two and two together and realized they're going to give that to me. And so I started to prepare myself and figured out what else I would want to put into place and who I asked to work with me. And then when the time came to announce who the person was, they chose another person and not me. And I wondered, why in the world would they have done that to me? Because I looked at my resume versus his, and there was no question that I was better. But, and it put me on I just couldn't figure out what had gone wrong with me. And then after about 2 months of trying to figure it out, I had an important insight, and that is that God doesn't hire any accountants in heaven. And what I mean by that is you and I, because we have finite minds, we have to aggregate in order to understanding what's going on. So in companies that I'm affiliated with, we send out invoices and we receive invoices many times every day. And we can't keep track of all of the individual data in each of these invoices. And so thank goodness we have accountants. And they can add up all of those numbers and give us a single number that allows us to say we're doing better or we're doing worse. Because we have limited minds, we need numbers, and we have to aggregate things in order to get a sense of what's going on. And And we have a sense, because we aggregate, that the world is organized in a hierarchical way, so that people who they are responsible for bigger numbers are more important in an organization than people who are responsible for smaller numbers. But then I realized that God has an infinite mind. And because of his capability, God doesn't have to aggregate people and turn those into numbers in order to understand completely what's going on in this world. Because he has an infinite mind, he doesn't need to count us as numbers. Then I realized, oh my gosh, so if that means that God only looks at people and not numbers, when I die and I have my interview with him, he's not going to say to me, oh my goodness, the important Professor Clayton Christensen from the Harvard Business School. God's not going to say that. Instead, what he's going to say to me is, all right, Clay, do you remember I put you in this situation? Can we just talk about what you did to help those people that you were with to become better people? And then if you remember I put you in this situation, and let's talk about the people there that you helped to become better people. And then if you remember I gave you 5 wonderful children, let's talk about what you did to help them become better people. And I realized that God will measure my life by the individual people who I helped to become better people. That's the way he will measure my life. And when I realized that, I realized that I need every day to find opportunities to help people that I work with and study with to become better people. Because that is the way God will measure my life. And I want to congratulate you, first to the faculty, because you have such great opportunity to help the people that you work with to be better people. And you students who have worked to help the people that you work with to become better people. You have chosen magnificent professions, and I thank you. God bless you. I pray that God will be with you as you try to become bigger and bigger and better people. Thank you.
So I hope that'll encourage you. I don't know whether you've opened that book and started reading it as I requested that you do, but I hope that'll encourage you to read and find out more about what his philosophies on life are, as well as his philosophies of how business runs, because he is a great, in both respects, as an academic and as a human being, and we can learn from both. So, Team G, that's Martin, Tyler, and Brian. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And are you all set?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay, we'll take over the screen and it's all yours.
Okay. So our article was called Skate to Where the Money Will Be. And the beginning was about a computer hardware company called IBM that was at the top of its game in the early 1980s due to the operating system and processors that they manufactured. However, shortly after that, Intel and Microsoft bought majority of the shares of the company's profits. And many people were asking themselves what they were thinking because they sold off their company when it was at the top of the industry, but some people believed it was a master idea and a good strategy, but it turned out not to be. Over the past couple of years, the authors of this article have been studying the evolution of industry value chains, and they came across a key concept known as disruptive technologies, which is defined as the pace of technological progress to help determine how an industry will change to adapt to a customer's needs. Every company competes differently at different stages of a product's evolution. Back then, when a product's functionality does not meet the needs of the customers, companies compete based on product performance. Then once competing companies' technology begins to improve and the customer's needs are met, that's when companies are forced to compete based on convenience, customization, price, and flexibility. When products are not yet good enough for mainstream customers, competitive pressures force engineers to focus on bringing the best possible performance out of each product by developing more efficient components. Nowadays, companies can mix and match the best components from the best suppliers to respond to the specific needs of individual customers. And PCs very quickly became the next big thing for the average consumer because customers were delighted to buy computers with their own custom assembled specifications, and it was delivered quickly at incredible prices. To end off my part, companies competing in an integrated market face very different challenges from those competing in a fragmented market. The bedrock principle to capture is that those who control the interdependent links in a value chain are the ones who get the most profit.
Okay, so the second part of the article, again, the bedrock principle, it's talking about those who control the interdependent links in a value chain capture the most profit. So in periods when product functionality is not yet good enough, those companies that are integrated, that design and make the end use products, they're going to make the most money for two reasons. First is because the interdependent and proprietary architecture of their product just makes differentiation straightforward. And then second, they have a high ratio of fixed to variable costs. So they're able to create these steep economies of scale. And these large competitors can amortize their high fixed costs over greater volume, which gives them a cost advantage over smaller competitors. So when you combine having differentiated products with strong cost advantages, you're going to make a lot of money. And it's just a good strategy to have. But when those large integrated companies start to overshoot their mainstream customers, when functionality does become good enough, that's when you'll kind of see a shift in where the money is going. So a good example of this is in the PC industry. So you have companies like Compaq and IBM that manufacture computers, but as functionality became good enough, you would see that money started flowing through those companies and into companies like Microsoft and Intel that produce these processors and these operating subsystems. And so where companies start to go wrong on this is when they face pressure from their investors to increase their return on assets. And they're unable to do that because they can't differentiate their product enough. And they're not able to, so they're trying to change their numerator and denominator on the ratio to increase it, and they're not able to do that. So instead, with the pressure that they're facing, they start to sell off these asset intensive units, which it will increase their return on assets, which is what the investors want, but that kind of takes them away from where the money will be in the future. And it's making money now, but they're not going to be where the money is in the future. So how this we can see how this plays out in the auto industry is like, nowadays, obviously you could walk into a dealership and customize a car exactly how you want, and it'll be ready quick. A car dealership now, or a car company now, could sell 200,000 units of their best model, and they'll be good off of that. And they're starting to make their architectures more modular. They're starting to, instead of having them, they're using less suppliers, and they're using just a few tier one suppliers to create these cars. So like, for example, GM and Ford, they started spinning out their component operations into separate companies just because of that reason. And then towards the end of this article, it kind of just says that executives whose companies are currently making lots of monies they should not wonder whether the power to earn attractive profits will shift, but when, because the way where the money goes will shift. It's just a matter of when, and they want to be there. They want to be in the right position when it does. And we don't have a Martin is not part of our group. He's like never been here, so we don't have a third presenter.
Okay. That was an interesting take on that article, and you brought up, Tyler, you talked about numerator and denominator.
Yes.
And I've spoken with a couple of the teams doing the BSG game um, individually about that, because there's a concern of how do I get the higher return on equity? And one of the ways you do that is to reduce the amount of equity, or return on assets, reduce the amount of assets. And it's a lot easier to do that than to have to work day in and day out to increase profits. You can effectively increase your profits by just a stroke of a pen.
Right.
And both you and Brian pointed out that that is a short-term fix, but you have to consider the long-term, because you can spin off some of the best, if in terms of return on assets, you can spin off some of the best asset capabilities you have. And in you also can set yourself up to get beaten up by other companies out there. So that was a good insight. As far as the game is concerned, you do want to consider reducing your equity by paying dividends or by buying back stock. But that is a short-term fix, and should be done when you know that you're going to keep throwing off cash consistently, that you don't have a need to don't have a need for reinvestment money. So thank you. Now let's see. It is. I think we'll try and. I'm gonna preempt you, Chris, and the rest of your team until next time. Is that okay?
So Thursday,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, team. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, I'm
That
fine with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Please help me.
Oh. There's some other things that I want to do, and I know we're not going to have enough time to do them. So if you'll bear with me for just a few seconds. I'm going to show you a film that I would normally show next week or next time when we have Barry Waymiller, but I got to balance out a number of different things because of the short time in a 1 hour class. I like a 2 hour class. So this is the Barry Waymiller story. I hope that when I showed you the film on Clay Christensen, that encouraged you, if you've not done it so far, to really dig into that book, because it will make a difference in your life and also in your professionalism as a businessman. Barry Waymiller is an entirely different company from any other that you've ever run into. I think it's unique in the United States. And I kind of put out a teaser as to what you would be looking for when you go through this on Thursday. But this is a very short story about the man. I think he could use, he gets a 5 o'clock shadow, and I think he'd look a little more professional if he shaved a little closer. Of course, this morning I nicked myself while I was shaving, so maybe I should let my beard grow longer while he gets his shorter.
I want to make you aware today of a crisis that we have in this country, that we have around the world. And the crisis is a crisis of leadership. We have over 130 million people in our workforce who go home every day feeling they work for a company that doesn't care about them. That is 7 out of 8 people in the workforce. These are our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, our sons and our daughters. Those precious people we brought into this world have a high probability, 88% chance, that are going to work for an organization that doesn't care for them. I was educated and raised in an environment where creating shareholder value, profits, would result in my success. I took management classes. I got a management degree. I got a job in management. So what I try and do? I tried to manage people. I was never taught the awesome responsibility that leadership has over the lives that are influenced by my leadership. I was raised and educated where capitalism was about profits, shareholder value, and my success. So I think from this perspective that we have a crisis in this country, a crisis of leadership. And many of the symptoms we are seeing, broken families, broken marriages, broken lives, are the result of us sending people home each day with a sense that they work for an organization that doesn't care about them. The good news is that we have the power to solve this tomorrow. We just need to engage our heads and our hearts in a leadership process that validates the worth of every individual, where everybody in this country matters. Our idea in leadership, what we have come to realize, is that our responsibility is to create an environment, whether you're in the military or in the industrial area or in government or education, an environment where people can discover their gifts, develop their gifts, share their gifts, and, extremely important, be recognized and appreciated for doing so, which creates an opportunity for them to go home each night to their families, whatever that family situation is, and have a more meaningful life, a life of purpose where they feel valued and where they get the chance to be what they were brought on this earth to be. So recognition is a key to our organization. And what I want to leave you with is that we, you and I, can change this tomorrow. It doesn't require money. It doesn't require anything physical other than your head and your heart to understand the profound significance you have on people's lives every day. We can change this world if we understand the great joy of leadership and the grave responsibility of leadership to look at those people under our care and help them have a successful life, one of significance, where they can share their gifts, be appreciated for doing so, and go home to whatever their family situation is with a sense that they matter. We need to move from a me-centric culture to a we-centric culture. Thank you very much.
As you can see, it is a unique company and a private company. They got about 7,000 people that work there at this point. They make a lot of money and they measure their success. One of the measures of their success is how few people they have get divorced. If they're doing their job and on the job, people will go home happy. When people are happy at home, they have a better chance of having a happy life, happy adult life. That incidentally, we will look at other things from Clay Christensen, and that's one of the things that he stresses, that people normally don't set up their goal in life to go get divorced or to have their children hate them. And yet, as he points out, that's the strategy that we have, we implement that causes our lives to be filled with wreckage. So we're going to have a relatively short amount of time to go over what the other thing I wanted to go over, which is the Global Ditchpin. And when I left you the last time, we had been able to go all the way through the first 5 months of transactions, first 4 months of transactions, and determine that they had run out of money. And so what we wanted to do, my assignment was to bring in an empty cash balance or cash budget report. And what we're going to do is to try and go through this, looking at the transactions and see if we can fill out that cash budget. So do you all have that report, the Global Ditchpin Company report?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, we do.
good. So this is a cash budget report. Now, I know we're not going to get time to go all the way through this, and this will be partially an exercise that you will do on your own, and I hope you will do it because there's much learning in this particular exercise. And what you see here is a cash budget. I'm using it in Excel. When I first got this case, there was no such thing as Excel. There were no what are called row and column generators that are used for financial planning. And so what I've done is on the left-hand side in creating this, I put down the entries that are going to show all the positive and negatives in cash. We have beginning cash. Next line in that model, it says cash inflows. That's merely a placeholder. Nothing's going to go in there. The line below that is collections, and this represents the collections from accounts receivable. And when we take our beginning cash and add the collections, we end up with a number that's our cash available for running the business. The line after cash available, again, is a placeholder called cash outflows. And I differentiate those two lines by putting them in italics. The only cash outflow we have is production costs, and this is what it takes to get the inventory to the level that's required. When we subtract that production cost, that will give us ending cash. And the thing that is probably the most difficult for you to understand initially is that ending cash gets carried forward and is the beginning cash for the following period. So let's take the chart, and I'd like to have somebody, just because this is not brain surgery here. Just let's go through the transactions that you have on that worksheet called Global Ditchpin Company, starting in January. You've got the first entry. What's the next entry?
February 1st.
Okay, February 1st, you have a number there, 1125. But let's look at the transactions that got us there. And who was that? Was that Chris?
Yes.
Okay. So Chris, what would get us to 1125? And don't say 250. But what was the inflows for this period?
Um,
Only You can look at the first paragraph there, listen.
You increased the ditch pins to a cost of 1,500.
Well, but what was the cash, what were the cash transactions? You had cash on hand, 875. And then what was your positive? What did you receive?
$1,000
And that was, what was the title on that?
receivables.
Okay, so that was collections. So we'll put that in there. And because I am using Excel, it's going to do the work for me. So I added the 1,000 to the 875. And gave us the cash available for operations, 1875. Now continue on, Chris. What are the, what do we spend the money on?
Are you talking about the inventory of the 750?
Correct.
750.
Okay, and that was listed as production cost. And so again, Excel does the work for us.
The 750 is production cost, not
Mhm.
is the
But-
production cost.
Yes, and that's for 1,000 units, Samuel. Now, as I said, the one thing that can be a little bit confusing is where does the cash go? It gets carried forward. All the rest of these transactions are either pluses or minus, but that one goes from ending cash up to beginning cash for the next period. Now, what were the collections for February?
$1,000?
Yeah. And that again was on the worksheet there. And who is that? Was that Emily?
Adriana. Adriana.
Okay. Did you say it was Sylvina?
No, it
Adriana.
was Adriana.
Okay. Okay, good. Looked all over. Adriana, then take the next step. This tells us how much cash we have available to work with, $2,125. And I'm just going to ask you to tell me the number to put in here for production costs.
750.
It's
This is it actually is going to be more than that.
it's gonna be 2,225. Or it's two.
Is it 1,500?
$1,500. It's 2,000 units. Now, I unfortunately, we will not have time to look at why that number popped up. But there's a reason for it. So there was 2,000 units times 75 cents, and that is equal to how many dollars?
1,500.
Yeah. And who was that just said that?
Leslie.
Hmm?
Leslie.
Okay, good. The thing that we need to remember, just as you do, if you really were working that game pretty hard, you have to be concerned with exchange rates in the game. And those will change from one period to the next. If you work that aspect of the game, you would have seen that happen. Now you can probably get by without ever looking at those exchange rates and just allow the exchange rates to either help or hurt you without really being in control of what happened. But in this case, we are going to be working with two different kinds of measures rather than have pesos or dinars or whatever it might be for the foreign currency. In this case, we're going to be working with both units and prices or costs. And it's important that we always consider what we're working with. About 3 years ago, we had a Mars rocket that got to Mars and dropped off a capsule that was supposed to land on the surface of Mars and do some measurements. And here it got up within about 50 miles of landing after going so many millions of miles to get to that point. And the plane crashed, or the unit crashed on the surface of Mars. And the problem was that they were measuring things in both imperial and in metric. We typically use the imperial system with inches and quarts and gallons, whereas the metric is all based on a much more logical system. But unless you tell somebody how you're calculating it, you can end up with conflicting results. And that was what happened. So in our case, we just want to remember that we're dealing with both with units in some cases and in dollars in other. So let's fill out the numbers for the remaining parts. For March, we started because we finished up with $625 in February. And remember, we made the comment that this was unusual because you would think if you made money, which they did, that your cash would increase, but that was not necessarily the case. So carrying forward that 625, what's the collections for the month of March?
1,500.
Okay, 1,500. And what were the production costs?
1875.
18, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because they're going to go up additional 500 units at 75 cents a piece, which is $375 added on to the same number you had the prior month. And that takes us down to 250. Now, because time is short, let me show you what Excel can do for you. If we look at the collections, what do we know about the collections? How much will they go up each month?
Can you're not sharing your screen with us?
You're kidding me. Did I do this? How darn foolish. I did this with another class. And I said, when you see that the emperor has no clothes on, please just tell me, because I'm walking around naked for the last 10 minutes. Now, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, it's better.
So I'm sorry. I don't want to waste time doing foolish things. So let's just real quickly review where we are. We started off with $875. You correctly identified that we collected $1,000 in January because that was what was on the report. That gave us a cash available $1,875. And we had production costs to build 1,000 units at 75 cents a piece or $750. So that we ended up with ending cash of 1,125. Then just taking the report as it reads, without giving full explanation, we collected 1,000 in February, and we had incurred production costs of $1,500, so that our ending cash ended up being 625, and we'll just accept that number. In March, that number gets carried forward to March, and the collections turn out to be 1,500, and production costs for 2,000 units will be 1,875. It's more than 2,000 units. 2,500 units is 1,875. And that brings us to 250, which is where you pointed out that I was walking around naked. Are you reasonably along with me on this?
Just like the round three king. It's like the round three king.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
We got some extra noise there in the background. Okay, gonna go back up to my report. Now, what I'm going to do is use Excel, because Excel can do this whole thing. And the reason it can is because we have established decision rules, and we intend to honor the decision rules by working to make sure that when we say we're going to increase sales by 500, we do increase sales by 500. So I can fill out all of the collections all the way along this continuum. In my case, I had done something here to make that possible. And you can see it increases. Now, our problem, the main problem that we were looking at is that we run out of cash. And so if we look at production costs similarly, I can calculate that every month, because our sales increase by $500, our production costs will increase by 75 cents times 500, or 375. Can you visualize that? Let me know you're live.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I've put something in here to just speed the process. By doing that, you can see that the cash flow in this company, and there's some things we haven't explained yet, but the cash flow in this company turns around very quickly. Turns around beginning the 1st of August. And so how much money do you need to borrow to plug the gap?
$125.
125. Is that Jia Ching?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. I need to borrow $125, and for how long?
2 months.
Very good. And after that point, they go positive. Now, there's several things that we could say and spend some time looking at. One thing is, I want you to recognize that in our last case that we're going to have, a Dell computer, this is the problem that they're having, that they are growing so well, I guess I should say, the reason that Global ran into a problem is because their growth was so fast and they had a need to absorb additional cash each month. But their growth was so fast that they ran out of money. And what you're going to see when we look at the Dell case is that they outrun their money. And they've got to come up with some ways. They've got a little longer time frame than Global Ditchpin has, where it was 24 hours. They have more time to put together a plan, and they do, to improve their cash flow. Now, so why does this happen? You know, why, how can we predict this? It's very typical for new companies to create a kind of an arc that they'll start off with a very high growth rate. And then as time goes by, the growth rate slows. In the case of this example, the growth rate was 500 sales of 500 units each month, incremental. If you look at from year 1 to year 2, or I'm sorry, from month 1 to month 2, actually, let's look at month 2 to month 3. From month 2 to month 3, the collections indicate that they increased sales by 50%. It went from 1,000 to 1,500. Can you see that? Hello?
Could you repeat the question?
From this period right here, February to March, it reflects an increase in sales of 500 units, going from 1,000 units in sales to 1,500. That's an increase of 50% in 1 month. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can see.
Yes.
And if you were to look back in the place where we put down a list of things that were characteristics of Global, one that we didn't get was item number 8, if you look at that at your leisure. And that said that sales were increasing, but at a decreasing rate. And this is typical, again, of companies that after they really get their sea legs, after they get over that initial tremendous growth rate, their growth rate tends to slow down. So if we were to look at the other end of this chart out here on the right, where we're going from 5,500 to 6,000 in the last 2 months, how much of an increase in sales does that represent? Certainly not 50%. Indeed, I'm going to help you here. It represents an 8% increase. And again, this is typical of companies as they age, that their sales continue to go up, but the rate of increase versus the rate of increase early in their corporate life is much lower. Tell me if you understand that sentence.
I understand it, but it just raises the question of why.
Why does it grow that way?
Why do they allow it to grow that way? Why do they like all of a sudden just halt?
All of a sudden do what?
Like they kind of like just halt. They don't produce as much. They kind of just like stop.
Well, what they do is the curve flattens out. They'll continue to increase. If we were to go out another year, they would be at about 14,000. And the increase from 13,500 to 14,000 is very, very small. And why does it happen that way? Well, it takes a lot more energy to sell more stuff. And also you begin to get a certain share of market, and it's difficult to get above that.
So are they getting like diminishing returns?
Well, it's diminishing returns in that the increase is smaller. But if you got one salesman, he may be busting his pick to get that first 1,000 units. And he's able to go out and get 1,500 the next month. And then 2,000 the month after that. But at some point, he just runs out of gas. He can't keep on increasing, even though the increase from month to month is smaller in relationship to total sales. It's still just, he does not have enough hours in the day to keep adding at the same rate of increase, that is 50% a month.
So did the company expand too fast then? Did he ex did he
Did
ex did he expand too fast as far as pushing his?
He expanded too fast, given the amount of money he put into the business in the first place. If he'd have said, look, let's increase, rather than going up 500 a month, let's go up at 100 a month, the numbers would have looked distinctly different. In fact, I don't know whether this will work or not, but supposing we put, well, I believe that at 1,000, but supposing we put in here, no, I can't make it work out. That's, I did not anticipate, that was Chris, right?
Yes.
A good question, but I did not anticipate that, and therefore I can't really simulate that for you. But you have to have controlled growth. You remember Southwest? They talked about as they grew their business, they did it at a controlled rate. And this meant not just the cash flow side of it, but also the use of all of their corporate assets. That there's only so quickly that they can hire people. There's only so quickly they can get delivery on additional planes. Only so quickly that they can add a new gate in a new city. Now, Chris, you could ask me the question, how does Amazon do it?
Bill, how does Amazon do it?
I have not the foggiest idea. That just goes beyond my pea brain to figure out. They're hiring like 50 or 100,000 people a month.
And they're expanding pretty fast too. So I see a lot of warehouses in Ontario being put up.
Yeah, they just keep on growing. They very quickly will become the largest company in the world.
Has anyone done a case study on it? I know I'm kind of going off topic, and I know people will probably we're going over, but I'm curious if anyone's ever done like a case study of them.
Yes, there have been.
Because I'm
And
curious to know.
I'll see what I can find. I'm actually writing that down.
Amazon does seem really different from Southwest though, because doesn't Amazon have a really high turnover?
Amazon, yes, their system is built on
Like
churning.
their employee turnover tends to be really, really high.
Yes.
Mhm.
They'll keep on hiring more and more people, put enough people in one end, and enough will come out at the bottom end to maintain their growth. But they understand that that's what's going to happen. That happens in a lot of the fast food restaurants, for example, but they'll have very high turnover, like 60 or 70%, Emily, every year.
Wow. All right.
Okay, I can't go any further with this. I am going to, there are other things I wanted to teach and I just am not going to be able to. I do have a sheet that I'll send you with some lessons that can be learned from this exercise. If there's anything I can get across, though, it is that as you grow rapidly, you will require more cash. And what you need to be able to do, that's why the treasurer got fired, is you need to be able to add, you need to be able to anticipate what your cash flow will look like. And the key, one of the keys to that is setting up binding targets, decision rules, and making sure everybody follow them. Next time, Barry Way Miller and Team H. So you have a good evening.
Thank you, Bill.
See
Thanks,
if I can get
Bill.
this out on Blackboard for you.